I have a question here that I get with some frequency on the air, and that has to do with how we do online discussions about Christianity with people who don't agree with us. And I don't do a lot of those, first off. I don't have the time for it, and I'm a slow typist, so that's a problem. But as I think about it, I think there are some differences between an online discussion and a conversation you're having with a one-on-one person. What's true about both conversations is you want to be very careful about how you comport yourself, how you characterize your views, how you interact with that person, the kind of goodwill that you show that person either in your gestures one-on-one or in the words that you choose, the tone of your discussion verbally or written. That's the most important thing. Now, if you read Tactics, you know that in the Steamroller chapter, I make the point that biblically, I don't think everybody deserves an answer. Some people just get too obnoxious and unpleasant that they disqualify themselves from the conversation after a fashion. And Jesus himself said, don't throw your pearls before swine, don't throw what is holy to dogs. I mean, there does seem to be an assessment you make at some point, and this is a personal assessment, it's subjective to some degree, that what you're doing is just wasting your time by taking good things and tossing them in the mud to be trampled underfoot. And that phrase that Jesus used next, which is that lest they trample them underfoot and turn and tear you to pieces, I think is helpful because it creates a little bit of a guideline for us to know how long we continue in a conversation. If it turns out that as we're talking with somebody, it sounds like they're going to just interrupt and trample everything underfoot and turn around and tear us to pieces, well, that might be a good time to get out of the discussion and just beg off or say, well, I think we've come to an impasse or whatever. One other thing that I want to add, though, and this applies even more, I think, to online conversations, is that you never know who your audience is. When you're talking with somebody face-to-face, it might be that there's another person that's listening in, and they're the person, kind of a ricochet evangelism kind of thing, that God means the conversation for. This is especially true in online conversations where other people are not only maybe reading in real time as you're interacting with this person online, but may check it out later, or somebody else might advance it and send an email or put it on a Facebook or whatever. The internet is forever, all right? So you never put anything on the internet that you wouldn't want to be there forever and go to anybody, because that could happen. And that's the good side of it too, because something good and productive that you say could have a lot of influence, and on the downside the same is true. That's why we want to be careful. That's why the most important thing is your engagement, your attitude, your manner, and your content. So when you're on the internet, you have more time to make your point. You're not being interrupted so much. Stick to one point if a lot of things are thrown at you. Don't let the person steamroller you with lots of different challenges at once. Do one thing at a time and then try to address that particular thing. And if you get weary of the conversation, there's no reason that you can't just back out. Just always keep in mind that if you stay engaged with somebody that's hostile and doesn't seem to be getting it or doesn't seem to be interested, other people are looking over your shoulder. They're reading, they're seeing, and they may be picking up not only on your content, but the grace with which you approach an ugly challenger. And when they see you approach somebody with grace and with confidence and with substance, well, this can be really powerful. And so this is another reason why you might want to extend a conversation longer than you're comfortable with if you have something meaningful to say. So there's some guidelines, whether you're talking with somebody or on the internet. Always be careful of the way you express yourself. Words, tone, gestures, manner. Be gracious, be clear, be compelling in your substance. And never forget, it might be somebody listening in that is the real person that God wants to change with your words. I have a postscript to my comments about interacting with people online and when to get in, when to get out. And I mentioned that the conduct is the most important, your content and your manner, how you're coming across, and you're free to get out of any conversation if you get tired of it, you don't think you're making any progress, you don't want to get beat up online in front of a bunch of people and have what the good things you say get trampled in the mud. At the same time, if you're maintaining good composure and you have good content, then keep in mind that it may be other people who are listening in that are getting the most value, not the person that you're engaged with. Now, 2 other qualifiers though. Don't try to do this on Twitter. Twitter, you have like, what, 126 characters or something like that, 140. I mean, you just, well, whatever it is, it's not enough to say anything meaningful. It might be good for little aphorisms, for you to fire out a little thought to get people thinking. This is the way I use Twitter, personally, Greg Koukl on Twitter. But I don't engage people in conversations trying to keep my comments down to 140 characters. This is impossible to do, especially for me. So I would encourage you not to engage these kinds of discussions on Twitter. Okay, and sometimes even the Facebook is awkward, but that's up to you. If you want to have those kinds of discussions in your Facebook living room, fine. But one other thought, though, so you have to make sure that the medium you're engaged in is the appropriate medium to have the kind of discussion that you're having. The second thing is that you have to be sure you hold the other person's feet to the fire. This is true whether talking to them or writing to them. It is not unusual for a skeptic or a critic to raise an issue and then you give a good response and then they scamper off to something else and they just completely ignore what you've said. It's like you're talking to a deaf person. Off they go with a new complaint and a new objection. It's good to get them to pause for a moment and ask them whether or not the response you gave was adequate to the task, and if it wasn't adequate, why not? And this is meant to try to manage somebody who is just disingenuous in their challenges. That is, they sound, at least initially, like there's somebody who wants answers, but they don't want answers. They just want to ask the questions and try to keep you off balance and keep steamrolling you and keep moving. They will never be satisfied. The way to find out whether they're genuine in their questions is to ask whether your answer satisfied them. If it does satisfy them, then that's an objection they no longer have with regards to Christianity, presumably, and they're not going to go in the next conversation with the next person online and ask the same question. If it doesn't satisfy them, then you need an explanation why. They should be able to tell you, well, this wasn't a good explanation for this reason. Or at least you know. If you can answer it, fine. If you can't, at least that's resolved. Then you can move on to something else. Beware of people. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be talking to them, but beware of them that are just disingenuous. They want to shoot off their mouth and try to trap you, make you look foolish, talk about what they know, but they're not interested in learning. These are the kinds of people, it seems to me, that Jesus probably had in mind when he said, don't throw your pearls to swine, don't throw what is holy to dogs. Anyway, it's a judgment call, it's up to you, but just keep those things in mind.